Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Wendy Silvers, and it is Wednesday, and we are here with a special presentation today. Usually we have the Awakened Mother podcast, and so we're widening the lens this morning, and it is about motherhood-fueled activism. And I'm going to introduce you to three women that are near and dear to my heart that I've met along my journey of both motherhood. Michelle Anderson and I met 10 years ago through the Agape International Spiritual Center and a gentleman named Gary Christmas. And I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting McLean several years ago through a friend of ours, and Jamie Barker I've recently met because we all have a real support and love for a gubernatorial candidate named Reinette Senum. So we are here today. We are here today because we are mama bears. And the mama bears have been poked, and we believe in the sanctity of motherhood as the last word for taking care of our children. And we also believe that it is incumbent upon us at this time in history that we step outside of any preconceived ideas or notions around political office, around the political process, around taking care of our children in a larger scale by having elected officials that are aligned with our values. So we're going to dive deep in the next 45 to 50 minutes about motherhood, about love, about activism, about choice, about Reinette Senum, and we may have a surprise visit, so we will see. But let me tell you a little bit about each woman that is here. Michelle Anderson is a radio personality, a producer, an MC, a speaker, and a mentor. She's been facilitating gatherings for those seeking spiritual connection and conscious collaboration for over 15 years. She's an avid supporter of Indigenous communities. We've also connected through Chief Phil Lane and been involved in some events together. And she regularly supports events that lead people back to nature, peace with each other, the galactic family, and Mother Earth. She's a sacred activist. She's passionate about sharing information. She is a host on Awakening Code Radio, which I had the delight of being a guest on last night with Gary Christmas at KXFM, our radio organization. And she's a popular speaker. She's working on Disclosure Fest, and she's just, a powerful mama. And then Jamie Arrigo is an editorial, commercial, and family photographer who is based in Los Angeles and another state. She commutes. She's amazing. She divides her time between running her creative agency, snapping photos for ethical brands, and hanging out with her family. She prides herself in bringing a unique perspective to the table and loves craft services. I love them too. Mostly, she just wants to dance and take pictures, not particularly in that order. And I'll make sure that you all know how to get to these incredible women. And then McLean McGown is a motherhood coach. She's host of the Mother podcast. She's a prenatal and postnatal healing expert, postpartum doula, nutritionist, hypnotherapist, Pilates, yoga, and meditation teacher, lactation educator, counselor, death doula, Reiki practitioner, wife, and mother to two daughters living in Los Angeles. And you can work with McLean via one-on-one and in her monthly group program, Mom Club. And she was inspired by the birth of her children to become this the mother coach. So I am Wendy Silvers, and I am a minister, a mama, a mothering coach. I have been engaged in supporting moms for over 20 years, moms and families. I'm the proud mother of a 21-year-old amazing young woman, and I am a sacred activist as well. And so we're going to just get into dialogue. I'm going to bring all of these women onto the stage so we can all be together, and we're going to just dive into this great dialogue about why we're here on the planet at this time, in our own humble opinion, and what we can do together, because together we're stronger. So welcome to the stage, Michelle and Jamie and McLean. I'm so honored to be in your company.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your passion and your commitment to educating people around the world about stepping into our greater truth. You know, you have so much courage, Wendy, and we talked about that on our show last night. About, I even had a moment where I was crying, you know, because I felt like I didn't use my voice soon enough, and the train left the tracks, and I was beating myself up a lot for that over the past couple of years, but thank you for just your grace and helping to empower all of us women.
Wow. It's a calling on my heart. I thank you for that. I appreciate the acknowledgement, and honestly, it's a calling on my heart. It's not something like, just like with the Million Mamas movement, that wasn't something that I sat down with a business coach and strategized and said, okay, so we're going to do a march, and then we're going to do this, and then you're going to roll out. It was nothing like that. I think my biggest growing edge is learning how to be strategic, because it's all very intuitive and organically guided. So I'm honored, and honestly, it was just, I couldn't not speak up. It was that, like, you know, that feeling inside that was just like, it's like when we're in labor. And
I feel like Jamie and McLean you're nodding your heads, and can you see the mama bear cup?
Oh, I love it.
yeah.
Wake the bear.
Yes.
You know,
amen.
What I love so much is, it's like this, I feel like I'll speak for myself. I feel like I'm moving into the matriarchal elder space. And I'm so inspired by you, Jamie and McLean. I mean,
in Los Angeles. McLean's the brave one. She's still in LA.
Well, I mean, whatever. We're all showing up. We're all showing up. So that's what's important.
Yeah.
But Jamie, I mean, you've been such an inspiration to me for so long. Oh my God, I'm gonna get emotional probably on this call. I literally never cry. In this eclipse, I'm like crying every day.
Holy.
Busted something open. I'm like,
let it go, sister. Let it go.
But I just want to shout out to Jamie, really, because, you know, she has been so fierce and brave and so shadow banned and so censored, and, you know, some real trolls have come after her. And I just thank you, Jamie, really for showing up as you do and inspiring me and inspiring so many of us, and even inspiring so many of the hundreds of thousands of women that you touch that maybe can't be vocal for whatever reason, or choose not to be, but are watching you every day. And it's lighting a fire within them. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And I feel the same way, Wendy. And thank you for having us. And thank you for all of your prayers. Every time I hear you pray, it makes me cry, and here I go. And I felt the same way. I felt like in 2020, I couldn't keep it quiet. I was just watching the total dismantling of our society, and watching all of these people that I'd loved and considered friends turn on each other. And suddenly all of these entities that we could all agree were corrupt were now the light and the governing force that everybody trusted in. And I just couldn't quite understand how we all of a sudden supported all of these politicians and three-letter agencies that we knew were not, working with our best interest at heart. So I couldn't keep it quiet. And McLean, I've been so inspired by you. I see your work all the time, and I see, the truth you're putting out. And I know it's hard in LA, and I know that, like, the communities you're in and the women you're surrounded by are not supportive. I know they're supportive of what we're saying, but they would never say it, because at the end of the day, most people want to be liked and want to be popular and don't want to make waves. And it doesn't matter. They will say they want truth, but at the end of the day, most people want a little bit of truth. And when you get past that comfort zone, you get past that barrier. No. And we're watching it play out in real time, especially as we see, I'm working with Reinette as her communications director, and I'm watching it play out in real time. All of these people who say they're about truth, they want truth until it's uncomfortable, and then they don't want truth anymore. Then what they want is comfort, and they want popularity, and they want friends, and they want all the bad stuff to just go away. But at the end of the day, it is really uncomfortable what's happening, and we need more people to stand up and speak truth.
And make it okay. Make it okay. One of the things that I'm feeling as you say that, Jamie, is because I see faces that float around in my, periphery that come around certain people that I know and how they're handling it. And one of the things that I've come to realize is some of those people, their nervous system is so fragile that even though this truth is coming in, they're doing this like, I can't hear it. Because their nervous system can't handle it. I see that with my mother. I see that with my child. I see that with many people surrounding me, and a lot of men too, that they hear it. And of course, we've been so propagandized with, those conspiracy theories and theorists and all that. And I have a hard time with that, but, or people that are constantly saying the same thing. I follow the science, and I follow the science too. But when the science is being so incredibly censored, I have to raise the red flag and say, why? Doesn't that make you want to look further, including with politicians that, there are only 26 people are running for governor of California, but you only see 4 names consistently in the news, in the media, in social media.
That's right.
You only see these 4 names. And I'm having a hard time even finding who financially supports them. I'm looking at all these different websites because I want to know, where did you take your campaign contributions from? And when you see these high dollar amounts coming from big corporations that I personally don't trust, why would I want to put my trust in somebody that's taking money from those corporations, or where there is a conflict of interest? And I don't want to be shamed for looking at that. I'm not trying to smear other people. I'm focused on the beauty of Reinette's campaign, her truth, her honesty, her courage, her fierceness, and the fact that she's listening. She's listening every time I've called on her and said, can you be on a Zoom with this person? She gets on, whether it's some little, somebody that people might call a nobody. She's there to listen to what their concerns are. She has jumped in with a lot of my First Nation Indigenous friends. She's done Zoom meetings over and over again to hear what is it that the citizens are really looking for in a governor, and she's lighting the fire. The other thing I love that's happening with this campaign is what is being brought to the surface about how critical and crucial and pivotal this primary is. June 7th, Jamie, you have been phenomenal at your creative ways of getting that out on social media or on your flyers that you do, or the video pieces that you're sharing of why it's so important that we vote in the primary, because only 2 of the top vote getters are going forward. And there's 26. I mean, it's a good way to divide our votes, and putting out there how important it is to don't turn in that ballot by mail, turn it in on June 7th. One of the people that I shared Reinette's campaign with, a guy that had no idea, hadn't heard about her, he got so inspired by what I shared with him. He went and put his ballot in the mail with her name on it this soon. And I was like, oh, because that gives the potential.
That's as good as gone.
What was that?
We'll keep that one for Newsom.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It gives the potential for some manipulation. And if people don't think there's election fraud happening and has been happening for years, I think that's why so many of my friends say, I don't vote, it's rigged. But what if you got in there at the last minute? How do they know how to account for the groundswell of people that are ignited by this campaign?
So I want to back up just a bit because everything you're saying is so true. And Jamie, yes, I concur what you've done and what you continue to do. It's just so inspiring. And as moms, did you ever think that there would be a day that you would be engaged in the political electoral process? So
Never.
right, what do you remember that moment, like we talk about those moments of clarity, or that like something where the cosmic tumblers, line up? Was there a moment in time where you were just like, I'm done with that, I'm in with this? Do you remember? You do. McLean, we haven't heard from you. Why don't you share with us?
I mean, it's such a long, journey. I'm sure they're like little mini bits, but the real one was September 2019, and I flew up to Sacramento with Lee Dundas when she was holding a press conference at the state capitol about the jab mandates for school children. And it just gives me chills to witness. I mean, just in all just frankness, I've lived a very privileged life where, as a white woman in the communities I've been in, like my voice has been pretty heard. I've gotten, I mean, we've all had tragedy, but you know what I'm saying? Like it was shocking to see the hallways lined with children with their injured babies and their children and signs, and our governor, nor would anyone from his office acknowledge all the people walking through the halls were mocking these women. And it broke my heart. And it put a fire under me where I was like, this is so beyond wrong. And, as a lifelong Democrat, the only person that came out and spoke was a male Republican saying, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. And I see you and I hear you, mothers. And it just lit a fire under me. And it's, it's cost me, but like, I don't care. I mean, like this matters. And this is going to be a moment in history that I hope that enough awaken that we look back and say, this, how do we let this happen on our watch? And we're fighting back, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to stay. This is not sustainable. And this is not the future we're signing up for our children. And then, rolling in, so that was 2019, and then rolling into the, these past 2 years. And I mean, I never was political. I never really cared about it. I actually come from a political family. So I'm kind of like, maybe I'm challenged, something's shot through my DNA now, 3 generations forward. But, now I'm a homeschooling parent. I'm in California. That was, never thought that was going to happen. And, through this fire, I do think we've all become warriors in different ways. And it is amazing. And even in LA, where so much has fallen to the wayside, I'm on a call with you for women, plus you other people, Monique and Carlene. But I have forged new relationships with people that on a soul level, I immediately drop in with, because I know what we're really fighting for, and what our intentions are. So there's been so many beautiful things in this, but that's really when it started for me.
I identify. I went up to, in 2015.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you've been in a long time.
Yeah, in 2015, I've been a parenting coach, trauma informed, trained in nonviolent principles, working with families on having empathy and compassion and connection. And in 2015, I had a client sit in front of me and say, well, have you heard about SB 277? And like you, McLean, and probably like Jamie and Michelle, I was like, politics, talk to me about meditation and visioning, and I'm right there. So when I read and heard about it, I started having meetings in my home, and we met every week for probably a year. And I went up to Sacramento 5 times. I remember the first hearing that I sat in, and I was just I do what's called open eye vigil. So I hold this really high consciousness space for divine and compelling right action unfolding. And I was just present to the lies that the authors of the bill were sharing with the committee members. And I walked out of that hearing and I just was, I felt something shift in my heart. I just thought, how come they're allowed to lie like that? Like, why? They're lying. That this senator is lying. And I was communicating with Michael Beckwith, who's one of my mentors. He's the founder of the Agape International Spiritual Center. And I said, I feel like I need a spiritual shower. Like I felt so dirty. And I went up to Sacramento 5 times in 2015. And then subsequently have gone up after that. And I just couldn't believe that elected officials didn't care. And the same thing, McLean, in 2015 and then in 2016, the hallways lined, overflowing. Every floor was filled with a family, at that time, there were not a lot of fathers. Now there's a lot more fathers that are engaged, but grandfathers, grandparents, all, just, I couldn't believe it. And then I actually stood in front of Senator Ben Allen, who was one of the co-authors of SB 277, who looked at me and when I talked to him about vaccine injury, and I'm sure he's been educated, but at that time he looked at me and he went like this and he went, I'm really not so sure about, the vaccine injury. And I just thought, I'm like, have you seen these people that are lining the halls where they call and judge people anti-vaxxers? But I would say 2/3 of the parents are parents who have vaccinated their kids and had horrendous results.
Oh, I would say more.
Well, I'm being generous.
Yeah.
I think it is more than that. And because the whole propagandization of vaccine injury, what does it look like? Right?
Well, if you look at the statistics, I mean, they came in California, that last bill, SB 276, it was like less than 1% of kids weren't vaccinated, wasn't it? Like a very, very insignificant percentage of children were not vaccinated. And they came after those kids anyway, even though the people that opted out were minding their own business. They just didn't want to participate in the system and they came after them anyway. And I have said since that bill passed that was their greatest mistake because they got greedy. They were making money hand over fist. And now that they got, it's
Can you explain that? Will you break that down about the money that they're making hand over fist, Jamie?
Oh my gosh, I don't know that. I mean, if we look at the billions, I don't know the specifics on the mandates within schools, but I can only assume that after the windfall we've seen to all of these pharmaceutical companies just in the last 2 years, right? Record profits for the pharmaceutical companies, and it's like the most brilliant scam ever. They mandated this product so every single school child has to take it. And the reason I think they're trying to get rid of the control group because the Dr. Thomas in Oregon had the one study where he said, I have these patients that are, vaccinated, these patients that aren't, and the ones that aren't are significantly healthier. I never see them because they're never sick. And the ones who are, it's all of the chronic stuff. And anyone who's read an insert knows it's all the chronic stuff, right? It's croup, respiratory, ear infections, the significant injuries are rare. So it's hard to pinpoint the connection there, but it's the subtle injuries that's what I experienced firsthand were these like subtle injuries, this general unwellness that I experienced with my son. And so they ignited that 1%, and those are the fierce mothers and the people who've seen it firsthand, and they pissed off that group of people. And that's what you're seeing now. And then you're seeing sort of like this wildfire of the parents that have had experienced vaccine injury firsthand, and they're giving out this information. And I've had people in my circle that are like, I had no idea. And I'm like, just read it. The MMR vaccine can give you diabetes. Just read it. It can, most of the vaccines that we give, including, I believe, the Hep B that they give at birth, I'm 99% sure can give you Guillain-Barré. So you have infants that are like, not developing correctly. And it's like, well, you jab them the first couple hours they were alive. You don't even know what normal is for your baby. So
I think they jab the moms, and then they jab pregnant moms. So you can't determine date of causation.
Why does an infant need to be protected from hepatitis B, which is transmitted through IV drug use and sex? Why does a newborn that's just born need that? That's the question I think, I ask. And going beyond the vaccines, I think all of that is such great information. And I thank you so much for what each one of you is doing and sharing in the way that what lit the fire under all of our, feet.
What prompts me so much to engage in conversations with people is that if you look at this from a divine viewing point, moving beyond this about the jabs, it's about freedom. It's about bodily autonomy. It's about once that permission is granted to the government to make decisions that affect a parent, to get between a parent and their child and freedoms, we are on such slippery slope. So it's what I appreciate so much about our dialogue is that we have that ability to see that it's about the jabs and it's more with like WHO, the pandemic treaty that May 22 to 28.
Will you talk about that, Wendy? And I don't know that much about it, but I know that it's coming quick, like the date that we're supposed to do something.
Well, Reinette is here. So it is, let me make sure, I want to make sure that, there she is. Yay! Let me bring you in with us. So, okay. Hello.
Hello.
So good to see you. We were just singing your praises and also diving our toe into the WHO pandemic treaty vote between May 22nd and 28th that is unfolding. And really, so Reinette Senum, gubernatorial candidate, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. As always. Is my microphone muted? Okay, we're good. Okay, great. It's great to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. So would you, do you want to speak about the WHO pandemic treaty before we speak about your 7 generations?
Sure. Well, I mean, none of this surprises me. We know that the WHO has been slowly creeping its fingers around the whole entire planet for quite some time, has these nation states who've signed on. And according to them, their WHO laws supersede our laws and constitution, which I'm kind of curious as to who gave them permission to do that. So this does not surprise me. We've been kind of calling this out for 2 years. We did say that, we expect to have a lot of reopening, going back to normal before the elections. We do expect there to be a clampdown later on, which again, we're starting to see that creep back again in schools, certain cities and so on. And so we knew that, there's a game that's played where when things start to get kind of pulled back, you'll see these other entities though still being draconian and still charging ahead. So that's the WHO with what they're trying to do on May 22nd. And that's even California legislators. So instead of them pulling back and releasing their grip on us, they're just going full throttle ahead with legislation that's extraordinarily draconian, and it doesn't seem to match or meet the needs of today, because we have everyone else kind of opening up and not requiring the jab passport or the social distancing and the business closures, and yet the legislation is continuing to amp up. And I believe what's going to happen is you're going to have another surge. And then we're going to see this clamping down again. And then you see all these states look to California and say, oh gosh, look at, and by the way, look at what California has. They have this incredible legislation. Let's follow their lead. It's draconian and outrageous and does not represent the needs or the desires or any kind of intelligence. And oh, by the way, the WHO now has been given all this control to come in here, declare a pandemic and a world health crisis, and they're going to supersede your own local and federal authority. It's a recipe for disaster, and we've been calling out for 2 years. And as we've been saying, it's been rolling out exactly and accordingly as we've been calling it.
Thank you. And that is exactly why we support you, and exactly why everyone who is listening to this, it's so important for you to contact your legislators, to research the WHO pandemic treaty, and to have your voice heard, and to learn about Reinette Senum and the platform that she has of the 7 generations principle. It is so humane, and it is so it is something that creates a legacy. It's that we're not only taking care of ourselves now, it's about the next 7 generations. So will you speak to that next 7 generations principle that you stand upon?
Sure. So as a former 2-time mayor and council person, I've been in the trenches as an activist and as a local representative. And I have been asking over the years, basically, like, what's our goal? Where are we going? And how do we measure ourselves and the decisions we make? And over the course of the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of the good work we've all done just backslide over time. And I've also seen the evisceration of the Constitution. And so I began to really look at, like, what's going wrong and how can we improve upon this? And so when I look back on our Constitution, ultimately, I realized that it was, of course, inspired by the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. Our forefathers were inspired by our indigenous people. Most people don't know that. And what I learned recently was actually Benjamin Franklin spent a good 7 years off and on with the Iroquois themselves, and was inspired by their law of peace, which essentially was their own constitution. And so when our forefathers framed the Constitution, interestingly enough, the Iroquois let them know that there was some fatal flaws. Many indigenous people across Turtle Island actually have what's called that 7 generation principle, which is every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. That is a guiding light for our decisions, right? And where we go and how we treat the planet. We try to make sure 7 generations has something. And then the other thing that was left out, unfortunately, this beautiful vessel is this anchor, which is the wisdom, the female elder council. And so what I was really encouraging is the 7 generation principle, right? So we have this guiding light of the 7 generation principle, but we also pull upon the wisdom of our elders who look back the last 2 generations to ensure for the next 7 generations. And so when the forefathers actually created this Constitution, the Iroquois did say that you actually have a fatal flaw. And one of them, of course, was also not including the female elder council. And instead, they created what's known as the Supreme Court instead, which had a whole different type of criteria for those who are part of the Supreme Court versus the female elder council. And so for me, it's really the 7 generation principle. Is like, look at you guys, I'm here. And yes, I'm running for governor, but this campaign supersedes politics and election cycles. This is actually about shifting the culture within California itself. And the best thing to do that is to shift how we show up in our day-to-day lives and how we make decisions and how we lead and where we're going collectively.
Thank you. Thank you. Very potent and sustainable. It's what you're offering. It really is sustainability in the deepest way. I appreciate when I've heard you speak regarding addressing the houseless. I mean, really having a solution. Where will you speak more about that? Your intention with the houseless when you're governor?
Sure. Once again, I say to people, the only reason why we have this humanitarian crisis is because our leaders are actually happy with it. It's called disaster capitalism, and somebody's making a lot of money off the backs of those who are struggling and in crises. As governor, the first thing I would do is declare a state of emergency around the houseless. At the same time, I would immediately loosen up the building codes on the commercial buildings that we have sitting empty right now. We can retrofit them to be mental health facilities, to be, for recovery, rehabilitation centers, and also low-income housing. And so once we get that going, at the same time, we reach out to the continuum of care committees throughout the state of California that we have in different counties. We reach out to the homeless shelters as well, and we actually look at their data to identify those who are most at risk to themselves on the streets and those around them, the businesses and the residences. and then we get them into the care facilities so they can begin to recover. At the same time, we need to also identify those who are just down on their luck, and they just need some low-income housing, some reskilling, some training, and then we help them find housing as well as get them placed into jobs. And so I have people ask me all the time, well, how are you going to address the issue of those who don't want to leave the streets? Well, fortunately, there's a lot of great models out there, so I don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. One of them is actually in Texas, in San Antonio, Texas. They actually have something called Haven for Hope, and it's a beautiful 22-acre piece of land. And in the very center of the land, they actually have a center that has over 180 different nonprofits, right? So it's like therapy, drug rehabilitation, reskilling, learning how to grow your own food. And what they do is it's like one-stop shopping for the homeless, rather than being out on the streets and having to drive across town or catch a bus here to go to get your therapy, to get your EBT, to whatever you need. That's just not realistic. Most people don't even know what day it is, and they certainly don't have the means or the money to go running around the city and the towns. So this is actually one-stop shopping for the homeless. And they can also have a place to live. They've got showers, they've got those wraparound services, they've got laundry facilities, they've got good, healthy food. But for those who do not want to participate in this, that's okay, but they still can't stay on the streets. They can actually plant their tent somewhere on that 22 acres, and they can live in the woods if they so choose, but they cannot be on the streets any longer. And I say to people, how can we possibly expect those who are in crises on the streets to rise out of their addictions, right, and their homelessness if they're in a complete crisis? We've got to get them out of the environment that's causing them to be in that crisis to begin with. And the other thing that's really key for me is really creating a sense of purpose. I did talk to an individual who was homeless for almost 10 years, became the executive director of a homeless shelter after being in the homeless shelter for 10 years. And he talked about the sense of purpose, how those who are homeless will never, ever rise out of their homelessness until they feel like they matter. So this is really about trying to tap into each individual and finding out what their purpose is. And that might just be peeling potatoes at dinner time, and that's it. Okay, that's fine. But they're not going to rise above their crisis and their homelessness unless they know their lives matter.
You. I remember hearing you speak about this. I was so moved by many of the things that you talked about. But what really struck me is we have a crisis. We have a crisis of humanity. Not only are we dealing with the freedoms being very slowly, drip, 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 so that there's only a certain group of people that really understand the bigger impact of these freedoms being removed, but we have this homelessness that is really the pandemic, and that you said something about how it's happening because the leaders are happy with this. Is that what I heard you say?
Oh yeah, they're making money from this. And people say, how? It's like, well, you have no bid contracts. You have NGOs that are in the business of helping the homeless, but once they help them and it's not a homeless issue, they lose their NGO, they lose their job. And I'm not saying that all people are like that, for sure, right? This is a bit of a broad statement, but definitely we have now seen hundreds of millions of dollars be dedicated to address the homeless situation. And we haven't seen any of that money on the streets in action for the most part. Where's the money? Where did it go?
Underneath what I hear you talking about is something that's very near to me, and that's healing trauma. I feel like we are living in a very trauma-induced environment. And we've got the health and medical freedom, we've got the homelessness, we've got the WHO pandemic treaty. We're like living with the amygdala going, like the alarm is just sounding. And then something that keeps coming to my mind is you've spoken about addressing the trauma, which is vital in order for someone to move, to know that they can leave the city or leave this tent that they have erupted. Their amygdala has to, come back down so for them to access like this is an opportunity, because their nervous systems have just been so dysregulated for so long.
Right. So, Dr. Gabor Mate in the book, Realm of Hungry Ghosts, talks about that a lot. And it starts actually in the womb, as a matter of fact, right? So the trauma is everything. In fact, I have a gentleman who actually uses native plants to work with veterans who've been traumatized in war. And what's so fascinating to me is he says, Reinette, when we're dealing with veterans' trauma, it's not from war. it's from their childhood. They're actually being triggered in war. But when you look at it, it's not stemming from the being out there in the field and fighting. It's actually, when you keep following it back, it's from the childhood. And so we need to address that. That's one reason why we have, of course, like the cycle of abuse. That's why we have a lot of people ending up in the prisons. And, I have a lot of people saying, what do you want to do around the prisons? I'm like, well, again, it's a multi-pronged approach. First and foremost, those who are in prison, we should be doing everything we can to help reskill them, right? And prepare them for reentry into the real world, so we lower that recidivism rate. And I know there's individuals out there who are like, no, give them, hard labor and don't make it easy for them. I'm like, look, either we're going to heal and we're going to stop the crime and the recidivism rate, or we're going to just continue just doing more of the same. And in order to stop doing more of the same, which is that definition of insanity, we've got to address the trauma. And so we've got to address it while they're in prison, while preparing them for the real world. And I've actually been inside Folsom Prison. I've actually spent time with these men who, some of them were serving life and some of them were serving, decades time. And I saw them in their therapy and the healing they were doing. And they were all, they've all identified how and why they had committed crimes. And they identified the wounds that they've been subjected to as children, small children. And I heard those stories. I spent about 6 hours with them. And I heard firsthand the stories. And I thought to myself, well, no wonder why they're committing crimes. I don't think I could have gotten beyond what they had endured. And so I'm not excusing them for the crimes, and they're not excusing themselves for the crimes either. They're just identifying the root of it. And so that's really, really key if we want to have a healthy planet. And then we have to go all the way beyond that and talk about the pipeline. I feel the education system has turned into a pipeline from the school system to the prison system. The school system is not actually this beautiful petri dish of learning. It's more like a prison system that actually normalizes making you feel like you're a criminal, or you're guilty, or you need to be policed. And the other thing is that we need to identify too the children themselves. Their wounds, right? And we need to support the parents, support the mothers, make sure they have childcare, make sure the education system is actually making the children at the end of 12 years better humans, not just being indoctrinated. There's all these things that we can be doing. And I've said to people, most folks don't realize is the witch hunts of Europe lasted for 300 years. And the local and regional economies throughout Europe were all based upon the witch hunt. The magistrate, the bounty hunter, the guillotine maker, right, the fire starter. These were their industries, and these are their local economies. And I say to people, if we can build economies based upon the witch hunt, we can certainly build economies based upon the healing and restoration. It's our choice.
Yes, absolutely. As a trauma-informed parenting educator, I absolutely know from healing my own trauma, from working with other families, from the science that shows the impact of the environment of the mother when a child is in utero impacts them throughout their lifetime. So right. It's not a quote unquote prison sentence, but what we are witnessing is the impact of unresolved trauma. And it speaks also, I would be really interested to know, I think the juvenile justice system, it's really not justice. When a 14-year-old does something based on their generational trauma, and then they get a sentence that is like 25 years to life. Right.
No, that's insane. I mean, and again, we know that most young people, especially men, don't really emotionally evolve until like 25 years old, right? I mean, it's kind of staggering. So I think we have to really, we have to look at the age of when the crime is committed and really have an honest conversation about, are they really criminal, or they just really need to heal?
Yeah, I think that would be so helpful. We would change so many policies. I believe, I think about some of the policies that are bearing down upon us in the state of California. And I think, these people don't understand the nature of trauma. They don't. And as the moms and Jamie Arrigo had to jump off to get her daughter. So she's in mommy duty, taking care of her babies. And each and all of us have been called because of that desire to take care of the children, take care of the earth. I mean, it's it's like there's a 3-alarm fire going on. We've got, we've got the earth, and we've got the water, and we've got the two-leggeds, we've got the, four. It's just remarkable. And I so appreciate you, Reinette, because you stand so sure-footed on, thank you. You stand so sure-footed on your platform. And really, it is so much about the next 7 generations.
Yeah, we have to do it differently. We've never had this kind of leadership before. And really, the leadership is more around how well is the GDP doing, the gross domestic product. That's been our measurement for decades. And that has nothing to do with wellness.
No.
That does not reflect how well we're doing in our lives and our communities and how our leaders are leading. And in fact, the GDP is based upon, and it helps the GDP to have cancers and disease and death and catastrophic fires and oil spills. That adds to the GDP. What does not add to the GDP is taking a nap, reading a book, having dinner with your family, right? But we don't measure those things, and we could. There's something called the gross or the happiness index, and that's from the country baton, where we can actually measure how well we're really doing. We have an American version, and we can ask the questions like, do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you have access to clean water, higher education, the arts? Do you feel that your government's actually hearing you? These are the questions we can ask every single year. We can survey. This is non-identifying information, so it's not like you're getting specific information on an individual. You're just getting the general information to see how well your leaders are leading. And this is the stuff that we need to change. And so, if you want to change your reality, you need to change what you're measuring. And right now, what we're measuring is something that actually causes harm to us and our planet. And we need to change that. We actually need to measure how well are we really doing.
Yes.
Can I say something really
McLean.
fast? Reinette, so wonderful to see you. I love you.
Hi, McLean.
Hi. When you're talking, this just feeds into everything and what you were just saying, Wendy, too, is I think what feels so good about Reinette and how you really stand in what you're saying is it is eldership, it is leadership. And we are lacking that for many generations. And it just makes me cry, like, on all these broken systems. It's because for many generations, we're just like ping ponging around for someone to lead us, some answers. And I think that's where this, like, just trust in the hierarchy of government has come from, because we haven't had leaders. We have old people, but the old people are not empowered, Michelle, this is probably like all up your, total alley in your work. It's like, and so that when you talk about the 7th generation, like, that's what it feels to me, is like standing up as a mom, holding this container. Like, I feel so held by everything that you say, Reinette. Like, I feel like, oh my God, my nervous system can relax, and like this state can be saved, and my children aren't going to be at risk every single day, which is what a lot of us moms feel like, so
Right.
I just really appreciate that energy. Even though you're a young elder, you're bringing the elder energy.
Nice recovery. You can call me an elder. I'm okay with it.
What's ironic about that is I was saying, when we first opened, I was saying how I feel like I'm moving into more of that elder matriarch role. So we're young elders, Reinette.
That's a compliment. That's like my biggest compliment.
Yeah. I'm not upset.
What's exciting for me to see is that you are speaking to all age groups, and they're embracing your vision, because I think a lot of our younger people felt hopeless, and that's why many of them don't vote. They just think the whole political system is a sham, and they haven't been getting activated. In the 60s, you saw that it was the young people with the fist in the air at the college campuses, and they were leading the charge to shine a light on where things didn't feel right. They didn't want to be in war. And you don't see that as much in our younger generation. So to see your platform igniting our younger generations, that gives me hope. And my gosh, McLean, what you're doing, standing with your feet in the fire in Los Angeles and homeschooling your kids and speaking your truth, you're making it, you're opening a path for other women to stand up and do the same. And I just applaud you for for leading that charge. And Wendy, for you getting us all together on this conversation. It needs to happen now. Like, I feel like I don't want to be that the sky is falling, but this primary is the election that is bringing awareness and shining a light on years and years and years of corruption. And I think the flame has been ignited. So people are starting to tell 10 people, and those people tell 10 people, and so on and so on. And even with censorship, we can get around that if we just activate the phone tree. Get on the phone and actually talk to people that we know so that they understand without, just through being curious. And Reinette, I thank you for sharing that with people, that to get curious rather than shoving down somebody's throat your opinion, ask, where they stand and why. And then, we can gently lead people over to what we've uncovered and discovered.
Right.
For the children and all these generations to come.
I would love it. We're getting, I mean, I can stay on longer, and I'm happy to do that. And I would love, Reinette, if you could speak to the importance of this primary, so that if there's anyone that's listening to this that doesn't know why it's important, they will be educated into why it's important.
Right. So, it's just been amazing. We've all been led to believe that the most important elections are the two, the primary in June, and then we have the general in November. And we think the general is the most important election. It's not true. It's actually the primary. But what's really interesting is that the media barely covers it. And there's a reason for that. The media doesn't want us to be engaged in the primary because it is the most important. Basically, that is where you set the ball up at the net for November. And by the time the primary election happens, basically the die has been cast. And so how it works, and myself, my campaign manager, Melissa Grace, Jamie Arrigo, who was on a moment ago, my communications director, we've been up and down the state of California. And there's a rule of thumb that we know of, and we actually agree it's true, we are experiencing it. And that is that 80% of the people agree on 90% of the issues. And that's true. Most people just have some real basic desires. And so, but what happens in the primary is that we barely hear about the primary. People are not engaged. They don't have ownership of it. They don't know. They have not been hearing much about the candidates. Like all you hear right now is that Newsom's a shoo-in, and he has no competition. He has 25 people running against him, for God's sake. And so people feel disenfranchised and not engaged. But what happens in the primaries is that it's usually the extreme left and right that vote. That 80% who agree on most 90% of the issues aren't voting in the primary. They wait till the general. So what happens is it's an open primary, which means you can vote for any party affiliation. Does not matter what your affiliation is. So we get the most extreme on the left and right who vote in the primary. They set the ball up at the net, and here comes the November election. Here's everyone in the middle going, wait, these are my two options. I don't identify with either of these people. And once again, I feel like I'm just voting for the lesser of two evil. Well, you are. You didn't participate in the general. So guess what? It's the most extremes who basically voted for you. And so there's also something really important to understand. And Melissa Grace came across this a week and a half ago. She realized, looking at the data of the 2018 primary, we have come to believe that Newsom won with this incredible mandate and he's got all the support in California. Well, in the 2018 primary, when he was popular, we have 22 million registered voters in California out of 40 million, 22. In the primary of 2018, only 7 million people voted. And out of that, only 2.3 million people voted for Newsom.
Wow.
Then 1.7 voted for John Cox, a Republican, and the rest was spread out with all the other candidates. So that's 10%, right? That's only 10% of the whole entire, registered voters who voted for Newsom. And that's when he was popular. So we're thinking, oh, he's obviously gonna win, because I was thinking, oh, he's gonna obviously win the primary. He's a shoo-in, and we're gonna be competing with him in November. And it was Melissa saying, wait, no. Actually, we can cut the head off the snake here in the primary. Newsom doesn't need to win. What we need are those individuals who are always voting in the general to actually vote in the primary. If they vote in the primary, they're gonna vote for candidates who are more in the center, more in the middle. I mean, just cut that head off that snake immediately, and Newsom doesn't have to make it into the general election in November. So we've been misled. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We are being disenfranchised and feeling hopeless by design. So we do not vote in the primary. We are not told that the primary is the most important election of the two. The media does not give it coverage. They don't want us to know about it. They don't want us to be invested in it. And they certainly don't want us to vote. They've led us to believe that the general is like the real election, and it's not. And so we are actually being dictated by the extremes on both sides because of the primary election. So I'm saying to people, the most important thing you can do is vote. And right now, as it currently stands, in 2018, 15 million out of the 22 million registered voters did not vote.
Wow.
So we can get those 15 million people to vote in the general, right? We're golden. And when I have people say, well, Reinette, how are you going to overcome a rigged election? Well, guess what? This is a numbers game, right? And we've got the numbers, we've got the people, we got the votes. And the powers that be, the only way they can win is they have to have as few people voting as possible, because the fewer people who vote, the easier it is to manipulate the outcome. But if we can overwhelm the system and have a lot of unexpected people voting in the primary, they can't adjust themselves quick enough. This is an old cruise ship that's been going on the same route in the same direction for a long, long time. They can't adjust that quickly, no matter how many mules they have, no matter how many ballot harvesters they have. If we have an extra 1 to 2 million voting unexpectedly, they can't handle those numbers. So even if they are rigging the election, the power is still in our hands. And if we don't vote, and we don't take that ballot, fill it out, and actually drop it off at the county, your election office, do not drop it off in the ballots on the streets and the corners and the libraries. Those aren't necessarily owned by your elections office or the state. They're actually owned by corporations, private corporations. Don't put them in there. Vote and drop it off a few days before the actual election so it can get counted. Drop it off at your actual elections county office and let it be counted there. And vote like your life depends upon it, because it does. And vote in the primary. If you don't vote in the primary, it's done. It's done. Right? That cast has been, that die's been cast. And so this is the most important election in the history of the state of California, and nobody knows about it.
That's so helpful. Well, we are going to spread the word for sure, and use all that we can to make sure that people know that and people know about you. Reinette's website is Elect Reinette. That's Reinette.com. And again, I'll make sure that you have contact information for all of the women that are here. Is there any last words that you would like to share, Reinette, Michelle, McLean, before we close?
Is everyone shy?
I'm not shy. I'm just waiting for everybody to speak.
I muted myself. I think one thing that's really helping me on the days when I feel overwhelmed by the negativity is just holding the light for what we want, because our intention is so powerful and we have forgotten that or not been taught that. And so if every awakened mama in this state visualizes you winning and you leading us to freedom in this state, it's going to happen.
That's right.
So yeah, I just offer that for anyone.
And I feel like just sharing, Reinette, you have inspired me so much, and so many of my friends that gathered to hear you speak in my home. And I'm watching how tirelessly you have taken on this campaign, and your campaign manager, Melissa Grace, is amazing. I feel like she could be lieutenant governor with you. She is so incredible. And what you're sharing is so impactful. So I just want to keep saying, I want to reiterate what McLean said about visioning in the future. And one of the things that I noticed Melissa does is a beautiful tactic. She calls you governor.
Yeah.
She calls Susan the first lady. She actually makes you almost smell your surroundings of, this is our governor. And that's how we manifest. I have goosebumps all over as I say that, because that's how we manifest our heart's desires. And McLean, I so appreciate you planting that seed to bring us back into what we want to see, rather that which we don't want to see. So thank you for that. And Wendy, thank you so much for hosting this and for your passion and your grace. And Feel so honored to be a part of it. Go, Reinette.
Yay.
Thank you.
Wendy.
Well, I know we are going to continue to have gatherings online and in person that I've been hosting, and I really agree. At almost every rally or event that I've spoken at, I've invited everybody to close their eyes. So I'm just going to invite you all right here, right now, to close your eyes just for a few seconds. I know it's a little unorthodox on a video to do that, but I just want you to close your eyes and move your awareness into your heart and just take a few deep breaths. And in your mind's eye, I invite you to visualize what it is that you want to see in your world, in your life, in your community, with our governor, Reinette Senum, with our children, with our partners, with our life, with the earth. What would you like to see? Just hold that in your mind's eye. I'll just speak a word right here, right now. So grateful and thankful for this gathering. So grateful and thankful for Governor Reinette Senum. So grateful and thankful for her team, for Melissa, for Jamie. So grateful for McLean and Michelle. So grateful for all of the children that have called us forth, the ones that are behind the horizon and the ones that are in our arms. Just so grateful, and on our hearts. So grateful for this gathering, so grateful for truth that cannot be hidden, so grateful for light, for love that is the very nature of each and all of us, so grateful for the expansion that is unfolding, just blessing Mama Gaia, the all of the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds and the creepy crawlers and the absolute land and the sky, every part and parcel of being in this human form, just blessing the ones that have come before us and the ones that come after us, just calling forth a new day, a new way, calling forth a world that does indeed serve and support the highest and the best unfolding for each and all of us, blessing a new style of government that Governor Reinette Senum speaks to and holds, just absolutely calling forth celebration and jubilation and compassion and grace, pressed down and overflowing, undergirded by a love that is so profound, it literally births and sustains galaxies. For this and so much more, I am grateful and thankful. I release this word. I know it goes forth and it finds root in soil that is fertile and is made manifest. And I lovingly allow that to be, saying amen, aho, ashe.
So it is. So it is.
All right.
Thank you, Wendy.
Mhm.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
So glad
So
you
appreciate
came
it. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Bye.